Okay, so what I'm going to try and do here is to try and explain about critical thinking, critical analysis, critical evaluation. And I'm going to start off by trying to say how can we read more effectively. Because I think one of the things that we tend to do, and I remember doing this very well, is you read a research paper, maybe a number of research papers, and what you seem to have out of that at the end of reading it is kind of basically just a bag of words. You know, you start at the beginning, read to the end, and you've just got some kind of fairly impressionistic mush of an understanding of what actually was going in that paper. So I'm going to try and, first of all, give you a framework, a way of trying to focus your reading. So your reading is being directed in order to answer a bunch of questions. And to begin with, I'm going to talk about one very simple but hugely important question that you need to ask whenever you read a research paper, which is basically, what's the point? Okay, what's the point? What are the aims? What are the objectives? Why is this piece of research being conducted? So I'm going to try and do this by talking about, really, I guess, what the scientific enterprise is all about. And psychology is a scientific discipline which attempts to use the principles of science. So let's try and think, and let's just try and simplify this and hopefully use this as a way of trying to understand what research papers are. Science, the purpose of science is to try and understand things in the world, why things exist, what the reasoning behind them. We're trying to explain phenomena. So we're trying to explain phenomena. Phenomena is what scientists call it, but we could equally use the word thing. There are such certain things in the world, and the purpose of science is to establish these things, find out what things are in the world, and then try and come up with some kind of an explanation as to why these things happen, and what the mechanisms are underneath them, etc., etc. So a thing, or as I said, if you want to be posh, you could call it a phenomenon. Okay, but let's stick with thing. It's a good old English word. So some things in the world are absolutely obvious. We don't need to really dispute them. So things such as the fact that everybody with normal colour vision sees the sky as being blue, at least in places other than Sheffield, is something that we don't need to do research on. You know, we don't need to do research trying to show that the sky is blue. It's a given. We all can see that. But other phenomena, we might need to provide evidence that this thing exists. So an example of this that I've given in the past is of the so-called unresponsive bystander or bystander apathy, the kind of idea that somebody may need help, but for some reason people who potentially could offer that help fail to do so. So why is this the case? And this was really started off, this line of research in psychology was started off by this woman. This is Kitty Genovese, who was murdered in Queens, New York, in the Queens District of New York in 1964. She was stabbed to death, and essentially there were a bunch of other people who were around at the time who could have potentially helped her. She was screaming, apparently. These people presumably heard her, and they could have done something, stepped in and saved her life, but nobody did. And this was kind of a hammer blow to Americans' view of themselves, or even maybe humans' view of themselves. You know, we like to portray ourselves as being nice people, as helpful people, as maybe altruistic people. But what seemed to happen here was the opposite of that. We didn't have anybody helping a person. So this seems to be portraying us as kind of nasty and selfish and all these kind of horrible things. So this was kind of important. The news got very excited about it, the papers, lots of stuff done on it. And this eventually led a couple of psychologists called Bibb Latané and Charlie Darley. Actually his name wasn't Charlie, it was John, but I just think it would be so cool if his name was actually Charlie Darley. Anyway, Bibb Latané and John Darley decided to look at this phenomenon in more detail to determine whether this thing did really exist. Was it just some kind of quirk of fate which led to these people not helping Kitty Genovese, or is there something about human nature which maybe leads to this phenomenon, this thing called bystander apathy, that people aren't prepared to help people when they're in need? So basically the first line of research was to establish the phenomenon, to establish the thing. You know, we didn't know this thing existed. The newspaper alludes that it might do, but we really need kind of hard scientific evidence to show that this thing is a real thing. More of that later. And that's what a lot of the early research in social psychology on this particular topic of bystander apathy attempts to do. establish the thing, show that this phenomenon is real. Other research attempts to show that the conditions of it, what factors might lead to certain people helping versus not helping. So if there's a lot of people potentially able to help, are people less likely to help than if there's only a few people who are less likely to help? What effects does the sex, gender, socioeconomic status of the person who needs help, what effect does that? That people are more likely to help well-dressed men than, say, more poorly dressed black women, or that kind of thing. All of this research was trying to just establish a thing and find out the nature of this thing. Okay? And research is needed to support this because there's absolutely no point in trying to explain a thing when the thing isn't real. Now, that might sound a strange thing, but in the early days of science, many scientists and philosophers were very much exercised by the problem of why it is that a fish in water weighs less than a fish out of water. Okay? And there were many hours spent debating this, so what the possible physical reasons for this could be. Maybe it's some kind of metaphysical reason, there's something weird, spooky going on which leads a fish to weigh less when it's in water than when it's out of water. So much effort was put into trying to explain the phenomenon of a fish weighing less in water than out. Some bright spark then decided to test it. So they got a fish in a bowl, presumably, and they put the fish in the fish bowl together, and they weighed the whole lot with the water in the tank, and then they took the fish out, and then weighed the fish separately, and weighed the water separately, and lo and behold, it turned out that a fish weighs no less or no more in water than out of water. The weight is the same. Point there, important to provide evidence for the thing you're trying to explain. If you don't find evidence for the thing you're trying to explain, then there's absolutely no point trying to explain it because you're explaining something which doesn't exist. Okay? So that alludes to the second kind of research. So one kind of research paper is just trying to establish a thing, showing that a thing exists, explore the nature of it. Another one actually tries to, what science is all about, trying to explain it. Why do we find this thing? So we can think of this as being multiple competing theories or hypotheses, whatever you want to call it. I'm just using T to stand for theory or theoretical account. And we might have three different theories all trying to competing to explain this single thing here. And in order to show that these theories explain the thing, we do experiments or we collect data and we find evidence for these potential theories. Now there could be one, there could be more than one theory. Some of them may be mutually exclusive, so in other words it's either theory 1 or theory 2 or theory 3, but quite often in psychology you'll realise that a particular phenomenon might have multiple theories which aren't really in competition with each other. You need each of the theories. 1 second, I'm just going to get a blackboard there, or whiteboard there. Okay, so let's just simplify this. So this is the second kind of psychological theory, psychological or scientific approach. One is to establish a thing, and the second thing to do, second kind of research program, is to try and come up with an explanation for why bystander apathy in this example exists. So there are a bunch of these. One of them is so-called diffusion of responsibility. Now, diffusion of responsibility basically means that when there's a bunch of people together and somebody needs help, that everybody is kind of saying, well, it's not me, I'm not responsible for that, these other people can do it. And because everybody's thinking the same thing, everybody's sitting there not doing anything. So that would predict, if this was the case, that the more people you have who can potentially help, the less likely any one of those individuals is to help. Because everybody is sitting down waiting for somebody else to do it. On the other hand, if somebody's on their own, and the person who's potentially helping knows that nobody else can help, then that might make them more likely to help. So immediately we've got a prediction here. We've got a prediction that the more likely, the fewer people, which is paradoxical, because you think the fewer people would lead to less likely to help because there's less people to help. But fewer people should mean that each individual is more likely to help. That's a prediction. So if this theory was correct, then we could do an experiment in which we varied the number of people around, put somebody at risk in some way, and then see if people are more likely to help when there are fewer of them. And indeed this prediction bears out. So this is evidence for the thing, bystander apathy. So this is kind of what we're trying to do. in psychology, in science. So this is an incredibly important question you want to ask yourself. Whenever you're reading a research paper, really important question. The first question, as you're reading it, in your mind should be, what is the point of this? What are the aims of the study? Are they trying to establish a thing? If so, what thing is it they're trying to establish? Or is it the other kind of research paper, where what they're trying to do is, we've already got a thing, we need to try and work out what possible explanation is for this. So really you should have, after reading a research paper, you should have the ability to write down, in a few sentences, the purpose of this paper was to establish the conditions under which bystander apathy exists, or whatever topic it is, or maybe, if it's the other kind of paper, the purpose of this paper was to test the diffusion of responsibility theory of bystander apathy. So this is what we're trying to do. So keep this in your mind when you're reading. If you focus your attention on trying to work out what the thing is, and then whether they're trying to test explanations for it, or whether they're just merely trying to establish a thing, then that should help you get the point of what the research is about. If you don't get the point of what the research is about, then unfortunately you're not going to have a complete or even clear understanding of what's going on, and you're not going to be able to clearly critique the particular paper. So first thing is, what is the thing? Second thing, which kind of paper is it? Is it establishing or testing? And bear in mind that a paper may have more than one aims. So a paper might have to test this, to explore this, to establish, it might have more than one aim. Unfortunately, in an ideal world, this would be done by the people who are writing the paper. They would do it for you. The purpose of this paper is to da da da. But quite often they don't. So it becomes a bit of a game where you've got to actually read the paper, and it's quite challenging. You've got to find out what the purpose of their paper was, because often they bury it beneath a load of words. But if you can extract that core structure out of it, then you're in a much better position to be critical of the paper, and you'll more clearly understand it. And this is also, remember, the thing that you are going to be doing in your project. Your project has a goal, an aim, a purpose, an objective. Okay. Quite often when I talk to third year students in the second semester, so remember these are people who've been doing their project for a few months, and I quite often go around and say, can you tell me what the purpose of your project is? And people will say, well, I'm looking at the relationship between this and this. Right? I'm looking at the relationship between optimism and altruism, or whatever it happens to be. And they go, yeah, okay, they're the variables, and that's what you're doing. But why? What is the purpose of that? Are you trying to explain something? Are you trying to establish something? What are you trying to do? And it's shocking quite how little even third year students will understand what they're trying to do, even though it's their own research. So it's important to keep coming back to this. Quite often the students may have forgotten, because I'm talking to them in May, whenever they started the project in, April, they started the project in October, so they may have forgotten, but I think quite often with a lot of projects, they're not clear, the students aren't clear exactly why they're doing what they're doing, and this might happen to you, and if this happens to you, talk to your supervisor. Try and make it clear that you've got in your head what the purpose of the research is for. So, simple message, end of this one. Science is all about trying to explain phenomena or things. Some papers are trying to show that the thing exists. Remember, the thing needs to exist, otherwise you're wasting your time trying to explain it. Remember, always weigh the fish. And then the second thing is to work out whether it's just trying to establish it or it's trying to test it. And if it is testing it, is it testing one theory? Is it testing two theories? Is it comparing theories? How are these theories different? Etc. Think like this, and this will give you a useful inroads into getting the paper, and hopefully it will make you to understand it better. Although I do stress again, this isn't a straightforward process, and it can take effort and a bit of banging your head against the wall before you get it, but it will yield results. Okay, thank you.